Revenge fantasy, revenge fantasy, revenge fantasy. How did I escape? With difficulty. How did I plan this moment? With pleasure. I really should not be playing French people, so sorry about that. And just like that, the author leaves no doubt that this is not a redemption story, not a hero's journey, not a tale of clearing one's name. It's a revenge story. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas is a 1,400-page roller coaster ride, a revenge story on par with modern movies like The Crow. Minus the gore, the black leather pants, the Nine Inch Nails covers of Joy Division songs, and the 90s goth fan service. You're not going to get excessive violence here, nor sex, nor gore. It's a period piece after all. Not an entirely accurate one, and although Napoleon's return to power is central to some of the themes in this book, it would be just as easy to tell the tale in another time period with other settings. Suspension of disbelief and the fantastical elements are going to make any period seem a little bit difficult to tell. Dumas does it perfectly here, though. This is going to be as spoiler-free a review as I can muster, because the book needs to be read, savored, and experienced in its full glory. The story is about a young man named Edmond Dumas, who is only 19 years of age, and he's engaged to a woman named Mercedes. Edmond gets done wrong, y'all. He gets done dirty by several men, namely Fernand Mondego, a crewmate named Danglars, who's like super jealous of him, and the magistrate de la Fort. This book feels like it's in 5 acts to me, but if you boil it down, it really has 2 main parts, an intro and an outro. In the first part, he's Edmond Dantes, a naive young man who befriends a fellow prisoner named Abbe Faria, the man who is largely responsible for turning Edward from a wet-behind-the-ears 19-year-old into a well-educated, well-spoken, deeply knowledgeable man during the 14 years, yes, 14 years that they spend in prison together. The depictions of how slowly time passes, the mental states of decline in captivity, and the extreme loneliness one feels is so vivid that this place feels like a book that was written specifically as a captivity type book, but it isn't. It tells a much larger story than that. Fortunately, I'm able to tell you about this part of the novel here without really ruining the book. This part of the book simply tells you how Edmond becomes the Count and makes the attributes and skills that he has as the Count more believable. It adds a bit of verisimilitude to an otherwise fantastical novel, y'all. Basically, the first half butters you up for the onslaught that takes place in the second half. The second half of the novel opens up in post-Napoleonic France in the city of Paris, and you're introduced to an entire host of new characters who are mainly the progeny of the main villains in the book. The villains are very much still alive and settled into their new lives, although the vanities that afflicted them in their youth are still prevalent here and become really integral into what happens to them. The Count appears in 2 guises, one as a man of the cloth and the other as the Count, and he changes his appearance and voice in both guises, and yes, it feels a bit like Superman and Clark Kent to me, where you're just supposed to think that everybody in this universe can't see that they're the same damn person. But suspension of disbelief was well established as a requirement before Edmond even gets out of prison here. And the over-the-top fantastic elements don't ruin the main thrust of the novel: revenge served cold. A lot of his smackdowns are predicated on the choices made by the villainous victims. Danglars, de la Fort, and Mondego are presented choices that, had they just taken the moral, dignified choice, would have ended up not drastically being punished the way that they were. Financial ruin, dissolved relationships, you name it, all would have been spared had they just acted like decent human beings during the revenge scenarios. But a leopard can't change its spots, and Edmond is on the hunt, y'all. The book ends a bit too fairy tale for me, minus one aspect that left me kind of disappointed. I mean, if you're going to tell a fairy tale ending, tell a fairy tale ending, but I felt that some of the characters kind of got slighted. One of the characters seemed to be an innocent bystander of the entire tale, and unfortunately doesn't get the ending I thought was most fitting. It wasn't a horrible ending, but it just felt unfair to me. Maybe it was a reflection of the times and what you would expect from gender roles, I don't know. Notable characters outside of the Count for me were Faria, and especially Mercedes, who had some really strong scenes in the book. She confronts the Count, who is about to duel her son, and she challenges him. And this scene reveals some pretty powerful suspicions and revelations that I had while reading the book. Like the over-the-top fairy tale ending, there are some aspects of the book that I could have done without. There feels to be some superfluous romantic hookups in the book that lend themselves to great storytelling and great fun. But for a 1,400-page book, it kind of wore thin a little bit for me. Don't get me wrong. This is not like slogging through Haruki Murakami's 1Q84, where I'm forced to read page after page of characters who are preparing meals and what's inside their damned refrigerators. Dumas knows his primary goal here is to entertain, and entertain he does. And for the final verdict, I'm going to give readability a little bit more than a half moon. It's not a terribly difficult novel to read, but it is an older novel, and there are certain sayings that are no longer said now. There are certain things that are obviously really easy to understand, but aren't really said the way they are in modern day. For example, when you're in a hurry to do something, you wouldn't say that I need to do it post haste, right? But it appears here in this translated version of the novel. As far as pacing goes, I'm going to give it a little bit more than a half moon as well. It does slow down significantly during the prison scenes. There are certain moments in certain chapters where I'm like, Lord, get me through this chapter, please. But it really, really, really pays off in the end. I did also think that that final fantastical ending kind of dragged on for me. I'm not really into that kind of an ending, so I just wanted to get it over with. And I really need to assess how sincere I am in talking about my interest in this book, because I say that I don't like revenge stories, but I really like the movie The Crow. It's probably one of my favorite superhero movies, and I don't even like that genre. Likewise here, I felt a little bit guilty being really into the book and enjoying some of the revenge scenarios in it, even though I'm uncomfortable overall with the theme. Overall, I would rank this awfully high. I give it an almost full moon. This is a roller coaster ride, a fun book to read. Dumas really kind of knocks it out of the park here like he did with the Three Musketeers, so I would highly recommend reading it. As always, thank you very much, guys. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I swear to God, it would help me out. Thank you.